Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Center for International Development's first Road to GEM 23 Climate and Development Series event. I am Angelica Ramache, a graduate student in International Relations and a CID student ambassador. CID's Road to GEM 23 Climate and Development Series precedes and helps launch CID's May 2023 Global Empowerment Meeting, Growing in a Green World. This spring, CID strives to elevate and learn from voices from the countries of the front lines of the climate crisis and will feature important learnings from the leaders who will be active participants at GEM 23. I very much look forward to today's discussion on global sustainability disclosure standards. The format for today's session is roughly a 30 to 35-minute presentation and then around 20 minutes for Q&A. So before we get started, I do want to mention a few housekeeping items. During the question and answer session, you can submit questions directly in the Q&A chat that you can see there, and I will ask them out loud, or you can as well ask them out loud before and introduce yourself. Also, we are recording today's session, and the video of this event will be available on the CID YouTube channel. And we'll be hosting more Road to GEM 23 events this semester, along with our standard Friday speaking series. So make sure to subscribe to our communication and check our website frequently to learn more about programming that may interest you. We will add links in a few minutes to the chat so you can all sign up for our newsletter and social media channels to hear more from CID. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to our fabulous speaker today, Ms. Isabel Saint Malo, who is the Senior Policy Advisor to the Administration of the United Nations Development Program, former Vice President of Panama, and member of the Board of Trustees of the International Financial Reporting Standards. Thank you very much, Isabel, for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Angelica, and thank you so much to the Center for International Development of Harvard University for extending this invitation to me. And particularly, I have had the privilege of participating of previous GEM conferences, and I think it is fantastic that this year there is this buildup towards the conference. And thank you for the opportunity of today sharing with you a little bit about the upcoming international sustainability standards, which I believe are an inflection point in terms of bringing sustainability to capital markets, to the private sector, to investors, and very relevant to this audience that is concerned about our climate. So thank you, and hello to those that have joined.
Thank you.
Should I go ahead and share my screen and begin?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Perfect. So I will talk to you today, as mentioned, from my role as a member of the Board of Trustees of the International Foundation for Reporting Standards. And something different is happening this year and has happened for the past 2 years to the IFRS, which has historically, for those of you that do not know the organization, has historically been an organization of accountants that sets the accounting standards for the majority of countries around the world. Around 150 jurisdictions in the world follow the accounting standards from the IFRS. And we have now begun the work for sustainability disclosure standards that will come out this year. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. So about the IFRS Foundation, it was established in 2001, as mentioned, responsible for the accounting standards required for use in more than 140 jurisdictions. For the past decade, maybe, and increasing, investors have been pushing for globally consistent and comparable sustainability-related disclosures. As climate becomes part of the risks that take a toll in the finances of corporations, investors need to know when they're going to put their money, what are the connections of risks related to climate change, to earthquakes, to water, to energy, to the business. Before, up to now, there were different sets of standards, and each corporation and market worked with those that was closer to them or that was better for them. You might be related with ISSB. You might be know something about GRI. I mean, there are several. So they were demanding we need globally consistent and comparable standards in order to compare. You know, what can I need to have apples and apples and pears in order to compare them. And there was a desire to provide global capital markets with a global solution to this requirement of comparability. In the words of Erkki Liikanen, the chair of the Board of Trustees of the IFRS Foundation, our work served the public interest by fostering trust and long-term stability in the global economy. Let me go a little bit more over this. Trust is based mostly on information, on transparency. Information and transparency with a given set of standards that is public, on time, reliable, is very, very relevant. That's what the IFRS works for. The IFRS ensures that around the world, financial reports are comparable and trustworthy, and that is what we are intending to do now with the sustainability standards that we are working for. So our standards are high quality, are understandable, are enforceable, and are globally accepted. And we build them in collaboration, and in more than collaboration, in consultation with our stakeholders. We take into consideration interpretations, comments from a wide range of stakeholders in order to develop this. And it's very interesting. I'll share with you that to the surprise of the organization, the design of the sustainability standards that are coming out this year around Q2 have raised a lot more comments and consultations than the accounting standards ever did. So what is the structure of the IFRS Foundation? We have a monitoring board, which is formed by jurisdictions and regulators, which is responsible for public accountability. We get from them feedback and oversight. Then we have the IFRS Foundation Trustees, which I am a member of. The IFRS Foundation Trustees is responsible for the governance of the IFRS, for the strategy, for the oversight of the work of the two standard bodies that we have. And then we have two, previously one, but today two independent standard setting bodies. And I will highlight and underline independent. This is very important because this is part of the core of the trust that is required for these standards to be supported around the world. So we have the International Accounting Standards Board, which has been going on since the beginning of the organization, with an IFRS Interpretations Committee. And then we have a newly formed International Sustainability Standards Board, which is the one that has been working for the past year at fast speed because of the requirement and the push from investors on the sustainability standards. All of last year's were consultations on the design of standards. And as mentioned, they're coming out towards the end of Q2. Now, our standards are designed for communication to investors. So while we engage with a wide array of stakeholders, which include the broader public, our main stakeholder are investors. Those are the ones that use these standards in order to compare, to measure, and to make decisions in terms of investment. So as mentioned, the International Accounting Standards Board publishes the accounting standards. Those are the norm for organizations for financial statements. And that is what investors and other capital market participants utilize. Now, the International Sustainability Standards Board has sustainability disclosure standards, which are coming out this year. And then these sustainability disclosures will also go on to investors and other capital market participants. Excuse me, I am trying to move here. So I will concentrate today more on the Sustainability Standards Board, because that is what is of relevance to this climate series and on the road to GEM. And the ISSB objectives are to develop standards of a global baseline of sustainability disclosures to meet information needs of investors globally. They will enable companies to provide comprehensive, decision-useful sustainability information to global capital markets, and they will deliver a common language of sustainability-related disclosures. And I will underline this, a common language, because it was very difficult to have different sets of standards and then again be able to compare one with the other in different jurisdictions and across regions of the world. Now, this common language of sustainability-related disclosures has a flexibility for regional building blocks to be added by regulators when necessary to meet local and multi-stakeholder information needs. I have been, for example, working with my own country, Panama, because the Board of Trustees is meeting in Latin America towards the end of the year, and this is relevant to regulators. What are Latin American regulators going to do in terms of this building block, in terms of these upcoming sustainability standards? Because it is relevant for regions to share interpretations, to share a common language, and this is something of relevance now that the standards are coming out. What are the market drivers for the ISSB? Sustainability factors have become a mainstream part of investment decision-making. As I have mentioned, if there are earthquakes, if there are heat waves, if there are increasing temperatures, if there are water shortages, loss of biodiversity, all of these are relevant to investment decision-making. Just to mention the climate, which has the first round of sustainability standards with S1 and S2. But then we are coming after S1 and S2, we are already beginning the work on biodiversity, human capital standards, and human rights standards. So social standards are also relevant to markets and to investment decision-making. We need to end the alphabet soup of voluntary initiatives. And this is the main objective of this IFRS effort. And we need support from international policymakers for a global baseline of sustainability disclosures for capital markets. The good news is that we've already seen support from the G7, from the G20, from the Financial Stability Board, and this is very, very important to the work that we're doing. So the first two standards that are coming out, those were put out for public consultation last year, March 2022. 1,400 comment letters were received from stakeholders globally. This is very, very high for IFRS standards. And this just shows the importance and how much the investor community has been waiting for a common set of standards and a shared comparable baseline in terms of sustainability standards. So the final standards to be issued by end of Q2 of 2023 are S1, which are the general requirements for disclosure of sustainability-related financial information, and S2, climate-related disclosures. And all of this is public. Our work is very transparent, so please feel free to go on our website and find these documents and find all of the relevant information, or make any question that you are interested in, because this is part of our work. We are interested in people learning about the standards and understanding them. This is what we do. We also work on capacity building with and through our partners. Standards need to be interpreted, knowledge needs to be shared. Academia plays a big role here. Students, I think this is the way to the future. 30 partners, global and local, are committed to ensuring readiness through our partnership framework. Together, we are already considering specific circumstances. For example, those circumstances of emerging and developing economies and smaller companies. And we are focused on enabling consistent and comparable high-quality disclosures to bring benefits of sustainability-related disclosures to all. This, on the introduction, it was referred to climate and development. This will make the challenges and the contributions to development very, very visible. This will be part of the added value of these standards coming out, with corporations being able to report and put out information on sustainability standards through their reporting. Now, the Q2 agenda consultation, we had public consultation on 4 projects to further understand standard setting priorities. And these are the ones beginning after the publication of S1 and S2. And as I have already mentioned, biodiversity, ecosystems and ecosystem services, human capitals, human rights, and the integration of reporting. And let me pause on this. It is something that is being discussed very, very highly in different venues. How are we going to link the financial reporting based on the accounting standards and the sustainability reporting based on the sustainability standards? This cannot be 2 standalone bodies. These need to be integrated somehow. And conversations have already begun on this. There are constant conversations between our 2 boards, our accounting standards board and our sustainability boards. And there are a wide array of people working on interpretation, what this means, how do we do it? How do we ensure that this is facilitated to those that will be required to do the reporting? So the G20 last year at their meeting in Bali had a leaders declaration, and I will highlight this phrase because it is very, very relevant to what we're talking about. The G20 said, we look forward to the finalization of standards by the International Sustainability Standards Board in support of globally consistent, comparable, and reliable climate-related financial disclosures and its work beyond climate. And we welcome the efforts to achieve interoperability across disclosure frameworks. I have mentioned that, to me, this is a tipping point. This is an inflection point. We are bringing the decade-long discussions on sustainability to the financial markets with one baseline. This will change the game in terms of what we commit to, what we report to in terms of sustainability. Now, in terms of the road to achieving global capital market standards, so we have the ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, which provide comprehensive global baseline through standards. Then we have IOSCO. IOSCO is responsible, it's a global organization responsible for assessing the standards with a view to recommend adoption. Then we have the audit standard setters. These enhance and develop assurance standards. Then we have jurisdictions which will need to require their financial ecosystems to adopt the standards. And then we have companies which will, on a first round, need to voluntarily decide to apply the standards. This is also very important. Initially, these standards are not going to be mandatory. These standards are going to be voluntary. So we at the IFRS right now are looking for early adopters. We're looking for corporations that say, hey, this is important to me. I commit to sustainability and I want to report about it. And I will be one of the early adopters. This is very important. And this is one of our objectives right now. So do you want to get involved? There are many ways of getting involved. You can download the IFRS standards and supporting material from our website. There is a lot of information there that will help you understand share, get a better sense of what they are. You can watch IISB and ISSB meetings. They're public. They are recorded. They are available to the public. It's very interesting. If you are into that, connect, listen, understand the discussions that are taking place, you can respond to live consultations. We need responses to our consultations. We need the stakeholders to give us their positions, their opinions. You can sign up for news alerts and, be updated through the news alerts of when different bodies are meeting, what publications they are putting out, when maybe standard setters are coming to your jurisdiction and you can go watch a seminar, when a webinar is coming out. Or you can discover which IFRS Foundation services can support you, including membership and education. There's a wide array of ways to get involved, and please go ahead. So this is how you can connect with us better. You can follow us online. You can through our website, through Twitter, through all of the social media spaces. And I think younger generations are very, very important to this discussion, to the application. Actually, younger generations, I believe, have been key in pushing and driving this force. The issues of climate, the issues of human rights, the issues of human capital. The private sector and the markets can no longer ignore them. And this is not the result of air. This is the result of different constituencies having pushed for a long time on this. And young people have had a very, very big role on this. And I congratulate you for that. And I invite you, don't give up. We're just beginning. On this tipping point, let's push for early adopters. Let's push for different jurisdictions to subscribe to the standards. This is about the future. This is about what will be there for future generations, and the role of academia is very, very important, and the role of students is very, very important. So once again, thank you, Sid and GEM preparators for this road to GEM, and I'm open for comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation and a very comprehensive one, Isabel. And thank you for your closing remarks, which are very important. Me as a young female, our work is still there, and we are here precisely listening to this wonderful presentation as a way to start this conversation. So you mentioned in your presentation that understanding the link between, the financial side with the sustainability standards and its integration after all. The question, just to get us started, that I will post here is, how do you think that we can ensure this link? I know that you mentioned conversations being started already by the IFRS, but what do you think would be effective practices to ensure this link?
Angelica, I come from the world of the global agenda. I have spent a lifetime working on the global agenda. You are probably all familiar with the sustainable development work, sustainable development objectives. I was working with the UN when we had the Millennium Development Objectives. I will just right there tell you a little bit about my age, which I should not be disclosing, but that's a reality. And the fact is that for many years, these issues were like the things that academia talked about, and the things that multilaterals talked about, and the things that the UN talked about. And I remember, when the Global Compact of the United Nations, which is a compact with the private sector to commit to 10 principles of human rights, climate, many of these things, when it came out, I worked very hard in committing the private sector to the principles. And the reaction then, in many cases, was like, what do I have to do with it? I already contribute enough. because I create jobs, I raise productivity, I contribute to GDP. And it is true, that is a lot. But that's where the link is. The world we know today, we can no longer afford to have growth on its own, just follow that path, because the reality is that even though the world has been growing and we have seen achievements in terms of sustainability and poverty and inequality and health and education, the advances that we have seen are nowhere near the results that we've had in increased productivity and GDP. This is why one of the discussions happening in terms of preparations for a summit next year that the Secretary General has convened, called Our Common Agenda, is beyond GDP. Is GDP the measurement that we should be talking about if we want to really measure countries' advancement? GDP doesn't consider climate. GDP doesn't consider human capital. GDP doesn't consider human rights, doesn't consider anything. So is that the tool that we need to continue? So I think the standards, to answer your question, contribute, because now this is tangible. You know, financial markets, numbers, where are risks for me, risks that can affect my numbers, risks that can affect my financial report. Once you see how this development world impacts your numbers, I think it will become a lot clearer to the private sector why we can no longer afford to have growth on one path and development on another. They need to be linked. And I think that we will see changes.
Indeed. I think that having, growth without sustainability is definitely not completely growth in itself. So that's a wonderful response. Thank you very much, Isabel. I know that Claire also has a question, and she will proceed now. And to all our attendees, please remember that you can drop your question in the box or raise your hand if you want to say it out loud as well.
Hi, Isabel. Thank you for this really good presentation. I keep thinking about, and I really like what you just said about GDP. That's always been kind of in my mind, honestly, all the time. But I'm also thinking about how the recent uptick of greenwashing in the private sector, and how you kind of see this, disclosure and more sustainability standards, almost kind of in terms of defining what a company, these standards a company must achieve. If you see the uptick in greenwashing being almost maybe less so, or if I don't know, if you see more people being able to see through the greenwashing because of this.
That's a great question, Claire. Thank you very much. So I believe, and this is a personal opinion, but I believe that greenwashing has been enabled in part because we don't have universal standards, because we don't have a global baseline, because we don't have a way of comparing one report with another. So I believe that the publication of the standards and the adoption of the standards, it's a very good step forward on the road to minimize greenwashing. And I believe that the more that stakeholders in general engage with, these things can be complicated. They can be hard to comprehend, but they don't need to be hard to comprehend. We need to make this language a common language. We need to make it accessible, available. The more we disclose, discuss, bring to conversations, bring to discussions, the more we make them transparent. And the more we make these things transparent, the less possible greenwashing is going to be. And, the whole discussion that came out last year, the backlash against ESG, I think that putting out these discussions is possible, because if there are issues with ESG, then let's make it better. If there are issues with corporations using this for greenwashing, let's discuss it and let's fix it. When you don't see problems and you don't identify them, you cannot solve them. So I see very positive outcomes to all of this related to the publication of the standards and the discussions around them.
Thank you.
Indeed, and that's definitely our hope to continue seeing advancement in this, Isabel. I am not sure if anybody has their hand raised. Let me just make sure. Oh, is it myself? No. Should we wait for a couple of few seconds?
Let me meanwhile, Angelica and Claire, just underline the role of the most diverse set of stakeholders. We need to contribute to demystifying the discussion on sustainability. It sounds scientific, greenhouse emissions. It's not. It's about making this world livable for future generations. It's about making this world, I live in Panama. I'm Panamanian and I reside in Panama, and our efforts as a country for recycling are very limited still. And I have made it my personal cause to, in the spaces around me, promote recycling. So, something that you might consider small, when you're living in Cambridge, it's unthinkable that people don't recycle, or if you live in Korea or Japan, well, not every country in the world is like that, unfortunately. And I was pushing a recycling program in the building that I reside in. Now the building I reside in, it's a building in a good neighborhood in Panama, where people that are educated reside and that are professionals reside. So you would think that, these things are relevant and understandable. And I was shocked, first by the little support to the program. Maybe a third of our neighbors, and the program is there, maybe just 1/3 adhere to it, the rest. And while I have gone one-on-one promoting through my neighbors to join, a couple of them have said to me, we're really not into that, And you're like, you're not into what? So we need to continue this conversation, and we need to make it accessible to everyone. And we might believe that we've done a lot of communicating and that this is plain and simple to everyone. It is not. It is far from. So the more that we bring out these issues and engage people, and each of us, if we change one person's habits and that person changes another person's habit, we will be contributing. So none of us can change the world on our own, but we can try to change the world around us. And through that, make our contributions. So go ahead, be my guest.
I want to highlight the wonderful phrase that you just said. We cannot change the world, but we can change the world around us. And I think that this is something that we really need to think about and, be the change that we want to see in the world. So that's very important to highlight. I know that Fatima has raised her hand, so please go ahead, Fatima.
Well, Angie, thank you so much for this great discussion. And Isabel, it's so great to have you here at Harvard Center for International Development. Mucho gusto and muchas gracias for this amazing presentation. I'm Fatima Sumar. I'm the executive director here at Harvard CID. And I wanted to kind of just build on your last comment around when we think a lot around global capitalism and the role for sustainability standards, which in many ways has become such a buzzword in the private sector. Is there a role that public citizens can take more actively as they think about their role as shareholders, especially in public corporations or others, or in private companies, where like through shareholder board meetings or other spaces, if they were to organize differently, they could have outsized impact and voice that kind of accelerates some of this urgency to change behavior at corporate levels, which, you know, if we go at the current pace, we may run out of time. So I'm just wondering, if you're an average citizen, but maybe you have stocks or shares, what's your voice, your role, your responsibility, and what are ways we could organize citizens differently around the world to take much more of an active voice?
Fatima, thank you so much for that fantastic question, because there is a role for everyone. And let me just share a couple that come to mind regarding your question, but I am sure that we can find a lot more than this couple that I'm going to mention. So first of all, there is a very interesting story, and I forget which corporation it is. It's one of the, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the fossil fuel corporations. There was a big like takeover the shareholders a couple of years ago with this group, which is a citizens group interested in pushing the agenda of corporations that do not have sustainability on their radar, pushing this agenda. And they decided to do it by buying shares, and through those shares, gaining a voice in the shareholders assembly. And then through that, trying to include the issues on the agenda. And on this particular example, which is there's even an HPS case on it, is very public. Very interestingly, there was first of all, they pushed back from the team of the company, which tried to prevent in every way this shareholders' effort to bring the issues to the agenda. So they tried in every way prior to the assembly to close the agenda, to leave them out, not to allow them to participate. So they had to overcome several obstacles, and they did. And through that, got the assembly to discuss the issue of this corporation's role in terms of sustainability. So one way is to try to engage in some way through shareholder assemblies and that sort of thing. But there's another way, which is accessible to everyone. And I will highlight the role of social media. I mean, social media plays such a huge role right now because everyone has a voice. Everyone, while before you needed to have a newspaper or a news outlet be interested in listening to you, today you're able through social media to connect with people and to share a message through that, that is very powerful. And reputation is everything. Corporations rely on their reputation. And the last thing any corporation needs is for their reputation to be tarnished because they do not comply with an agenda that is of interest to the general public. So Fatima, I would say that those are two ways, one a little bit more complicated and another one simpler, but there's a way for everyone. And thank you for raising that question.
Now, Isabel, thanks. If I could just quickly, Angie, can I respond really quickly?
Absolutely, please go ahead.
Okay, so Isabel, no, thank you. That really resonated with me. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize that oftentimes as an individual, we can feel very hopeless in when we think about how drastic and urgent the needs are around climate change, and feeling like we don't have enough power to change the systems ourselves, right? Or the information or the resources to do this. And I just wanted to kind of underscore your point, because I know this talk is going to be disseminated through multiple channels here at Harvard and CID. And so for our audience members, wherever you sit around the world, whether you work for organizations or as an individual, that you have enormous corporate power to change the system, whether it's your social power or your individual power. And so I just really appreciate you underscoring that point. And Isabel, I'm sorry, we're going to miss you. And we're so glad you were at GEM last year. And we can't wait to bring you back to GEM for future years as well. So thank you so much.
So do I, Fatima. I will be there, I'm sure, at some point. Thank you again.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you very much. I think that we have no more questions. Yes. Okay, good. So thank you very much, Isabel, for such a wonderful conversation, for your wonderful presentation. We've definitely learned a lot from this. And as we are preparing ourselves for the GEM 23 this year, we really want to highlight our participation as young people, our participation as women, our participation as a regular citizen. So it is really important to take action. And with that, I do want to give you the time for your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Angelica. Once again, thank you for the invitation. And I think what you have just said are the core of my closing remarks. We can all contribute to what the world needs. We each have our little space or our bigger space, whether it is within our circle, our corporations, our family. Let's take those spaces. Let's take those spaces and let's bring this discussion to everyone, because it is about the world that our children and our grandchildren are going to live in. It's about the space that we're leaving to them. The minimum thing that we can do is to leave for them a world similar to what we received when we were born. And that is up to all of us. So let's take the space.
Indeed, let's take the space. So once again, Isabel, a huge thanks from CID and myself for your time and your commitment for these causes and for such an important conversation. To all, thank you very much for your questions and for attending this webinar. We'll be hosting more Road to GEM 23 events this semester, along again with our standard Friday seminar series. So make sure to subscribe to our communication channels that we've linked in the chat. And it will be until our next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.